Yasher Koach to everyone who participated so beautifully in our Torah service. We're so grateful for those videos. We're grateful to Madeline for chanting Torah so beautifully. And we're grateful to all of you who came up from wherever you are to get an aliyah. May it be an aliyah filled with blessing for the coming year. So here is my sermon. When do you accept the things you cannot change? When do you change the things you cannot accept? I'll ask again. When do you accept the things you cannot change? When do you change the things you cannot accept? A Hasidic story is told of a man whose wife was ill, whose horse had a bad foot, whose roof had a leak. The man went to the Rebbe and said, Rebbe, my wife is not feeling well, my horse has a bad foot, and my roof has a leak. What can I do? The Rebbe replied, the next time Rosh Chodesh, the new month, comes and we recite the Hallel prayer, have special intention on the line, Ana Hashem, please God. So the man did just as the Rebbe said. He prayed, Ana Hashem Hoshiana, Ana Hashem Atzlichana, please God save me. Please God grant me success. So fervently and with such intention. But nothing happened. The man's wife still didn't feel well. The horse still had a bad foot, and the roof still had a leak. So the man returned to the Rebbe upset and said, Rebbe, I did just as you said. I prayed with special intention at please God, but nothing happened. All of my troubles remain. The Rebbe looked at him and asked, which please God did you have intention on? The man replied, please God save me. Please God grant me success, of course. The Rebbe shook his head. No, I didn't mean for you to have intention on that line. I meant for you to have the intention on Ana Hashem ki ani avdecha. Please God, because I am your servant. I meant for you to say, God, I won't request anything more because I am your servant and I will accept whatever you have in store for me. The man in the story was protesting the troubles in his life. The Rebbe was encouraging him to accept them as God's will, for there was nothing that could be done to change them. When do we protest? When do we accept our lot in life? 5780, 2020, has been a year filled with uncertainty, anxiety, and grief. There continues to be a pandemic that changes the very essence of how we live our lives. Never would I have imagined that we would be conducting our high holiday services, our Passover Seders, our funerals and our Shivas, our weddings and our baby namings by Zoom. But here we are, on Zoom, because to be together would mean potentially dangerous exposure to the coronavirus. There continues to be a national reckoning on race and justice as the murders of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks, and others have set off a movement for accountability, justice, and reform. The West Coast is engulfed in devastating wildfires. Princeton University and many other universities have gone remote for the fall 2020 semester, and many of those that brought back students sent them home again after outbreaks on campus. The list can go on, enumerating the sheer number of things we could not have anticipated or expected. Last night, at the start of Rosh Hashanah, we found out that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, RBG, of blessed memory, had passed away. Indeed, those things that we are grieving, unanticipated and unexpected, continues to grow. When do we accept our circumstances and when do we change our circumstances? Such a distinction is one of the critical questions in so many large national crossroads and even many of our personal crossroads. On Rosh Hashanah, as we just did, we read the Akedah, the story of the binding of Isaac. God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son. It is seen as a test of faith. How loyal is Abraham to God? Is he so loyal that he'd sacrifice his child? But how could God ask such a thing of Abraham? What kind of God would do such a thing? And perhaps most importantly, why didn't Abraham protest? After all, he did protest Sodom and Gomorrah only 4 chapters earlier. He spoke directly and critically to God. Will you kill the innocent along with the guilty? Far be it from you. Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat? Will the judge of all the earth not enact justice? And this is exactly the response that God wanted to hear. God engages in a back and forth, a negotiation about innocent lives. I look at this as one of the first Amidahs in history. It says explicitly in the Torah, Abraham remained standing before God. And I like to model my own Amidah prayers, those moments when I imagine that I am one-on-one with God after Abraham's example. And with RBG, Justice Ginsburg, in mind, I am now thinking about this exchange as justices deliberating a case. What is the just thing to do here? How are we to make a decision in the case of God versus Sodom and Gomorrah? For a long time, I've seen this exchange more as an act of divine lobbying. Abraham will not accept God's decision. He advocates for change based on justice and mercy. He will not stand idly by as God destroys the innocent along with the guilty. Abraham changes the thing he cannot accept in Sodom and Gomorrah. But Abraham accepts the thing he cannot change in the Akedah. Where is the divine lobbying now? It's hard to understand how Abraham doesn't protest the Akedah. We can speculate the many possible reasons he didn't. The Torah sets up both in such different ways, but both are tests. One to see if he'll protest, one to see if he'll accept. He succeeds in both cases with diametrically opposite approaches. How are we to get it right? How can we know it's better to protest or better to accept? It can be so unclear to know what to do. Even among Princeton students, whether to accept or protest the decision to go remote this semester was unclear. Thankfully, most students understood the public health crisis and didn't protest on those grounds. But several did choose, with the university's blessing, to take gap years and avoid the online class structure currently in place for at least this semester. The majority chose to stay the course, pun fully intended, and to enroll in online classwork this academic year. The interplay between acceptance and protest manifests also when handling grief. I have known people in our community who in the last year or two have lost mothers, have lost fathers, and have lost children. One mother who lost her son continues, I think, to protest and will likely protest for the rest of her life. How can such an injustice, the injustice of losing a child in their early 20s, ever be accepted? The same is true of someone who just lost her father. How can such an injustice ever be accepted? He passed away too soon, probably from COVID-19, which caused already poor health to get worse. How can the world exist without him? How are we to move on without those who we most loved and we were most close to in our lives? It's an injustice too great to accept. As much as she wishes she could accept, her only choice right now is to protest. Many people have only the option to protest, for the injustice they've experienced is too great to accept. I would like to remember Rabbi Adam Feldman of blessed memory, who was a colleague and friend, the rabbi of the Jewish Center in Princeton, who gave so much to everybody around him. He also passed away too soon. Who will we call now when we need to partner on projects together? Who will help me facilitate my God Talk program with the students in their Hebrew school? And I would like to remember Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg of blessed memory, who passed away yesterday and left so many of us heartbroken and bereft. RBG shared her view about dissent or protest on the Supreme Court, and I quote, "Dissents speak to a future age. It's not simply to say my colleagues are wrong and I would do it this way, but the greatest dissents do become court opinions, and gradually over time, their views become the dominant ones. So that's the dissenters' hope, that they are writing not for today, but for tomorrow. Even when a decision doesn't go our way, there remains hope in the possibility that things will be different down the road. The majority opinion today will become the dominant view tomorrow, and we are grateful to RBG for all the numerous things she did to make our tomorrows so much better. Of course, there are also those who successfully accept bad news and grief with grace and contentment. I've been inspired, for example, by a friend and colleague, Imam Sohaib Sultan, the Muslim chaplain and coordinator of the Muslim Life Program at Princeton, who was diagnosed in the spring with stage 4 cancer. The prognosis was grave, and he wrote publicly about his approach to the news and his reflections and processing. And I quote, "Upon receiving the diagnosis, an immediate calm, peace, and acceptance came into my heart. Upon interrogating and having the feeling interrogated, I just felt even more contentment with God's decree. Slowly, I saw that same peace enter into the heart of my family. This does not mean there isn't grief. When I think of my baby girl growing up without a father, or my wife sitting all alone in our bedroom in the night, or my parents not having me to help them with their chores, or my sister and her children not having my love and support, tears flow. But the heart does not complain. God gave me an amazing life. He gives and takes. He owes us nothing. All is His. His decree is merciful and wise and just, even if we can't immediately see it. End quote. This remarkable acceptance is inspiring. It's reminiscent of the Rebbe in the story who tells his follower that we must accept what God gives to us, that we are God's servants. And so we've seen acceptance here and we've seen protest. What is there in between them? What is in the middle? When I was an undergrad, I remember hearing Elie Wiesel of blessed memory talk about his anger towards God after the Holocaust. After all, how could God have let the atrocities of the Holocaust happen? After what they experienced, many survivors stopped believing in God altogether. With so much praise and thanksgiving in our prayer, those grieving the most painful losses had an understandably hard time with such words. They didn't feel true. They were betrayals. They were invalidating. And so Elie Wiesel concluded, the prayer from which a person's fate is absent, their anguish ignored, is not called prayer. Rather, people must bring to prayer the fullness of their experience, including doubt, disappointment, and anger, in order for their prayers to be meaningful. It seems to me that this is the area of the middle ground between acceptance and protest. It's what John Lewis of blessed memory called good trouble. It's believing in the system, maintaining the relationships, not severing ties, and also trying to change that system and work on the relationships from within. For the Holocaust survivor, pure protest is becoming an atheist or leaving the community altogether. Pure acceptance is trying to justify how God could have let the horrors happen without any blame or accountability. The middle is productive anger. It's the moral outrage. It's asking at the top of our lungs, will not the judge of all the earth enact justice? So I will conclude with a challenge. As we enter these 10 days of repentance, which will conclude next Monday evening as the gates shut at the end of Yom Kippur, examine those things you accept and those things you protest. What are you protesting that would be better accepted? What are you accepting that would be better protested? And what will it take for you to change your approach? And here's another challenge too. As we are more isolated and apart than ever, we find ourselves more in need of community and connection than perhaps we did when we had easier access to it. It would be better that we do not accept our social distance and isolation in such a way that would make us into pariahs. On the contrary, let us protest our necessary isolation by leveraging the means available to us to remain socially connected, even when we're physically apart. This Zoom service as an example. The task of cultivating relationships is for many an even more difficult one. Let's protest the circumstances we find ourselves in and defiantly remain connected to those we love in safe and responsible ways. What intention will you set for yourself this Rosh Hashanah? Will you ask, please God save me, please God grant me success, and work to change your reality? Or will you exclaim, please God, I am your servant, and accept whatever comes your way graciously? Or will you find some space in between protest and acceptance and be in relationship with them both? These are the choices that can define us and shape the trajectory of our lives from this Rosh Hashanah to the next. Will you look back in a year from now and be proud of what you chose to do? May all that we accept and may all that we protest lead us and those around us to be written into the book of life. Shana Tova Metuka, wishing you a sweet, happy, and healthy New Year.